The Sahara has been a desert for many million years. But there were also brief exceptional times. During several interglacial periods in the Quaternary, the Sahara suddenly turned green. Times of a wet climate. Rivers and lakes formed and provided the basis for vegetation and human settlements. During these wet phases, the Sahel zone expanded northwards into the Sahara and brought precious subtropical rain. At the same time, the Mediterranean climate belt shifted southwards, attacking the desert also from the Mediterranean side. High rainfall filled the groundwater basins and lakes developed, such as the Lake Fezzan. During a wet phase 30,000 years ago, there were people living in Libya down to 20 degrees latitude. But areas south of this point remained uninhabited. During the Neolithic, 12,000 years before present, the final wet phase began. Once again, the Sahel zone was on the move and entered Fezzan. People following the water settled down in the Saharan mountains and valleys. The Neolithic reign eventually ended 3,500 years ago, when the subtropical zone shifted back to its real home in the south. The people have long left, but their carvings and paintings are a constant reminder of a lost world. A world that seems so unreal today in the boiling desert heat. And there's something else that the green Sahara has left behind. Water. Large parts of the groundwater from the Quaternary wet phases are still stored underneath the Sahara. The water fuels numerous oases all over southern Libya. Fragile islands of life in an ocean of rock and sand.
The lakes in the Ubari or the lakes in northern Chad, the lakes in northern Sudan, like Merch, for example, they are in morphological depressions, and they are probably remaining parts of groundwater exposed to the surface, and the longer the time lasts that the area is dry, in other words, this dry desert period of the Sahara goes on, the more the water table will decrease and it will disappear somewhere. Bahr Namuz is a different case because this has something to do with volcanism, and it may be older groundwater which by volcanic activity, heat flow or whatever, is kept at surface. The water in the bigger lake in Bahr Namuz is very hot. At surface, it's in the order of 15-20 degrees because of high evaporation. But 20-30 centimeters below surface, it's very hot. I tested it. I went there to swim. And my dog, at that time I had a dog in my early years in Libya. My dog followed me and learned swimming in Bahr Namuz.
The water in southern Libya is reservoired in multiple aquifers ranging from Cambro Ordovician all the way up to the Nubian. Life in the Sahara today depends on the fossil groundwater from the Quaternary wet times. And also the Great Man-Made River project uses this valuable resource and pumps it to the coastal towns in northern Libya. Water is life. We have to be grateful to nature for this gift. But let's put our oil explorer hat on for a moment. And suddenly things look surprisingly different. Put simply, water is an enemy of oil. Locally, the Quaternary water may have flushed out part of our precious black gold. Clearly the end of a love affair.
If you take Jebel Ati, we were interested in Jebel Ati, and one of our ideas was it might be flushed, and it's only 100 or 120 kilometers from areas where water infiltrates.
Water flushing is a serious problem for the migrations of oil in the periphery of the Murzik Basin, especially in the western part of the Murzik Basin, where we have a lot of water flooding coming from Algeria.
The head of the water table in Algeria is higher. So that way, I think the fresh water is flushing or running towards the low areas.
So that water can flush it, and that can migrate down dip toward the east and northeast of the basin, and has created a lot of problem for the oil migration, and can be even a secondary migration for the oil by flushing, I think.
There is very clear evidence from the wells that have been drilled that we do have fresh water entering the reservoirs, particularly around the margins of the basin. So we see a very clear salinity profile as we move out into the basin, which tells us that there is flushing of fresh water that is occurring. It is an issue in terms of understanding the prospectivity, particularly of the more marginal parts of the basins. It's something that we need to be very aware of and to take account of, and to incorporate in our risking of individual prospects.
We need to know the behavior of the freshwater movement and how it's been moved from a place to another, and we need to really address the freshwater flushing by means of porosity, permeability, of movement directions and diagenesis. That can be a barrier, can be a seal. So maybe if we can identify some zones that have really diagenesis that can prevent freshwater from flushing that area, probably that's one of the new innovative ideas that we can really put our fingers on, and maybe we can start working with it.
We've learned so much since the beginning of hydrocarbon exploration in southern Libya.
When we worked in the field in the late 50s, early 60s, we thought it was easy to make predictions. Even after we found out that structural setups had changed several times during Earth history. We thought that it's in the basin, the facies is not changing much. But as I learn now from drilling results, it is not all that easy. In other words, our way of predicting things was probably too simple.
We started off with some basic geological concepts and have kept refining them continuously until today. Who knows, maybe in 20 years' time, geologists will laugh about the funny models that we use in exploration today. But it's all part of the fact-finding process. And so are the dry holes in Morzuk and Kufra. Despite the over 3 billion barrels of oil that have now been discovered in the northern Morzuk Basin so far, statistically only every 6th well has been a discovery.
Yes, there have been quite a number of wells drilled now in the Morzuk Basin, and indeed many of those wells have turned out to be dry. There are certainly wells that, in hindsight, when we've acquired more seismic data, we've come to realise were not drilled on structure. There are other wells which have encountered low-quality reservoirs, tight reservoirs, and those are for a number of different reasons. Some of them because of the depth of burial that's involved, some of them related to the very rapid facies changes that we see within the main glacial system that is the key reservoir. Certainly quite a number of them have failed because they've turned out not to be connected to a particular source area, and therefore they have not been charged with hydrocarbons.
And there is another probably fact that the survey is also a little bit off, because we were in the field and we have looked at one of the wells that is about 800 feet of structure, because now using GPS is very precise. So I think there is a lot of reasons combined together. So I think if we need to do a really good work in Libya, I think we need to establish some sort of a new project that really resurvey all the wells, especially the dry wells. And I think we will be surprised that we missed some structures.
So it's very important when we look at the wells that have been drilled that we understand in some detail what the reasons were for a particular failure in a particular place, because they very often vary from well to well.
Those wells that have been drilled dry, they are not really a waste, because those wells are really conducted very good information that we can study.
Since the big discoveries in the northern part, exploration in the Morzuk Basin has moved on. Suddenly, also the central and southern portions of the basin have entered the spotlight, areas that have been hardly looked at in the past.
To my mind, this region, the central and southern part of the Morzuk Basin, is extremely exciting, with the potential for very large petroleum reserves, which may be as much as, or more in fact, than has already been discovered in the northern part of the basin.
With the more seismic we do carry out right now and more drilling planned for the future, I think production will, of course, extend to these areas, and we see that we have a very bright picture from here to 10 years in the coming.
Well, there are many reasons why southern Libya is attractive to oil companies these days. First of all, it's one of the few remaining areas in the world which is truly underexplored. And it's underexplored in an area which is immediately adjacent to some very large fields. So of course this makes it very attractive. We know that the petroleum system works in the northern parts of the basins, and there's no reason why it shouldn't work in the southern parts. And given that we have large structures there, there is at least the potential to find some very big fields. And that makes it extremely attractive.
The prospectivity of that area, I think, will primarily depend on the location of the source kitchens and the migration story. The Silurian shale section certainly fins towards the south, but we know it's developed quite a way down to the south in the Morzuk Basin. I think the prospectivity would mainly depend on whether or not there's an access to a mature source kitchen in that area.
We earned our academic degree proudly in the northern Morzuk Basin, studying the Paleozoic petroleum system here in great detail. Now the time has come where we need to prove that we've learned our lessons and are able to apply our knowledge successfully. The Kufra Basin seems to be the ideal challenge.
There is no doubt that the depositional systems between the Kufra and the Morzuk Basin are actually almost identical. So very, very similar indeed. So we recognise in the field in the Kufra Basin that we have the Ordovician, late Ordovician glacial system present, the Mamuniat equivalent. So there is no doubt that the reservoir is there. We see very clearly on the seismic data that we have that there is a lot of structuration. So very clearly we are going to be able to develop prospects. If there is an area of uncertainty, it again relies on the distribution and indeed the maturity of the early Silurian hot shale, the primary source rock. We know that it occurs. We have identified it in shallow boreholes. So it is certainly present, but it appears to be patchy, much as it is in the Morzuk Basin. If there is one potential difference between the two basins, it's to do with the later history of the two basins and the amount of burial of the source rock and the level of maturity. It's a complex story in the Morzuk Basin. The source rock has been buried more deeply than it is today, and over much of the basin has been uplifted in the Cretaceous and Tertiary. We know that present day, quite significant parts of the Kufra Basin, the basal Silurian hot shale, would not be mature as it is today. But we think again that it probably was buried more deeply in the past. So one of the keys is understanding how much burial there was in the past and when the basin was uplifted and when the basin margins were uplifted.
Our geological concepts for Kufra are ready, based on the Morzuk analogue. It's the hard data in Kufra that's still in short supply. From a data point of view, there was more data available in Morzuk in the 1960s than from the Kufra Basin today. The two wells in Kufra are not too impressive when compared to the well density in Morzuk. But even the more than 100 Morzuk wells are dwarfed by the number of wells drilled in areas like the North Sea or the Gulf of Mexico. There's certainly room for more in southern Libya.
I think there are more oil fields out in southern Libya. I think the recipe is, yes, look at the petroleum system, do all the science, do all the risking, but ultimately, if there's a big structure there, it's probably worth drilling. In an area with a world-class source rock and a good reservoir and a simple system, then the way to find some more big fields is to drill wells.
We're on a good track. If we continue our efforts as in the previous 10 years, our understanding of the regional geology will improve further. And there are some questions that we have to particularly concentrate on.
I think there are a number of very significant challenges that remain for us to address in terms of understanding properly the geology of the southern Libyan basins. All of us still have a tendency to rely on lithostratigraphy as being the prime way that we divide up the stratigraphic column. And it's very clear that we need to do a considerable amount of biostratigraphic work within the lower Paleozoic in particular, so that we can make chronostratigraphic correlations across the basin. Where we have very heterogeneous reservoirs, it's very easy to miscorrelate one sand to another, or indeed to miscorrelate one shale unit to another. So we remain in a situation for many of the basins where using lithostratigraphic terms is not helping us.
The type sections are present now are not really quite the representative of the subsurface. So what we need to really revise those type sections, and I think we need to form some sort of a committee that is really responsible for these kind of type sections and naming formation for the nomenclature, because I think it is important that to speak the same language between all the companies. We have to really unite the names of the formations, the age of the formations. We cannot everybody just go on and change whatever.
This is, I mean, a big challenge even for NUC exploration department. Now we are currently working just to formulate or to nominate a committee for the formation nomenclatures and for the stratigraphic division and subdivisions. And this is, I mean, a target or a task is going to be started, I hope that by the next year, just to establish a good columnar section and good stratigraphic and biostratigraphic subdivisions for all the formation to understand it very well.
And of course, geological systems are known for their bad habit of not paying attention to national boundaries.
There is some efforts done in the past that by some geoscientists to, let's say, integrate the different geology of the different Paleozoic basins. We have seen some publications in this regard. But that's maybe just the beginning. I mean, that's the minimum. I'm sure that's if we, let's say, join forces between, let's say, NOC, Sonatrach, and other scientific institutions in Egypt and in Morocco, of course, with the help of known universities. I'm sure that's we can do better, and we can understand exactly the things related, particularly to the petroleum exploration.
A better age control over the strata means also a better basis unravelling the complex structural history of southern Libya.
One of the other main areas that we need to continue to put focus on in exploration terms is improving the quality of the seismic data. Clearly, when you are exploring for Paleozoic reservoirs, these generally tend to be quite hard, deep rocks. They are often very difficult to image. There have been significant improvements over the years. We have new seismic processing algorithms that allow us to improve the resolution quite considerably, but that's another area in which we need to continue to work. And clearly, progressively, we will need, as an industry, to move more towards 3D data sets rather than 2D data sets, so that we can be quite clear about the geometry of the prospects and the structures that we drill.
Despite the digital age we live in today, hydrocarbon exploration is still done by people. It's not a secret that even the best computers require human input to produce realistic results. Garbage in, garbage out. A well-trained workforce is the basis for exploration success.
The problem is to convince the oil companies to take more students, to invest in human resources, because this is the most important. And I know most of the students, the geologists you see in the society are my graduates, and I am very proud of their contribution, because whenever they are given the chance to continue their education, they exert a great effort in order to succeed and to accomplish success in their profession.
And geologists need to talk to each other, to inform each other about recent findings, and to discuss strange and not so strange ideas. For this, they need a forum.
The Earth Science Society of Libya has been very keen on this topic of exchange of geological and exploratory information. They are pushing very hard, and they are getting the help and support of the National Oil Corporation to hold symposia from time to time and to have field excursions to different parts of these basins. I urge all oil companies to cooperate with the Earth Science Society of Libya and with the National Oil Foundation to promote exploration efforts, and also to have some chance of publishing this information.
Petroleum geology is teamwork, a cooperation of geoscience experts within organizations, but also across organization boundaries.
And when it comes to geology, I think the cooperation is a necessity, and it's something I think is a must. I mean, it's because you cannot differentiate scientific research in universities or in educational institutions from work can be carried out in exploration companies, because in the university see only surface geology. They don't have, I mean, as tools to know exactly what's in the ground, in the subsurface. Companies only authorities who have access, because they are drilling wells, which is very costly, universities cannot do. Seismic also is very costly, and universities cannot do, but oil companies they can provide. So combining the data from exploration companies and related to the subsurface with some geological field trips carried out by the educational institutions, these two together will give you, I mean, that's a full picture about the geology, and this is the beauty, I mean, that's about geology. It's the combining forces is really will lead, at least at the end, to something fruitful for both parties.
Predictive geological concepts can only be generated when all players work together. A good compromise between confidentiality and open exchange is of benefit to everyone, and without it, even this film could not have been made.
Some people, they think maybe geology is just, I mean, it's monopolized by oil companies, but that's not true. I mean, it's, but knowing the geology, even if we don't have oil or gas, it in itself is a very important issue. I mean, this will shed more light on the African continent. I mean, that's understanding the geology of Africa. Even I think children in schools, they start, if they go to the field and see different types of rocks, they start collecting it and look at its beauty. Of course, in addition to some fossils and so on. I think we do like people to give attention more and more to the educational part of geology.
The geology of southern Libya is the key to billions of barrels of oil. But apart from that, it's also much more. The geology of southern Libya is part of our own history, about a world that kept changing restlessly. The geology of southern Libya is about time that keeps moving on. It cannot be stopped, All that remains is memory. A memory of wild action, fossilized in fascinating rocks of the Murzuq and Kufra basins. Lastly, the geology of southern Libya is also about the people who helped to unravel the Sahara's geological secrets. People who got hooked by the desert's beauty and its amazing geological story.
Well, I've been very fortunate that I've been able to work in the Sahara and in southern Libya for actually the vast majority of my career as an exploration geologist, probably for the last 20 years or so. And as I've traveled around the world, it's actually the geology of southern Libya which has brought me time and time again back to going out into the field and looking at the rocks. It's some of the most fantastic geology in the world. And it's been a real thrill to be able to spend that time in the field with Libyan colleagues who have a huge knowledge of the geology of the region, to be able to take out with us young geologists starting out in their career and in being able to inspire them with the geology of their own country. So I've found my time in Libya and in the fieldwork in Libya to be some of the best times in my life.
Petroleum geology is not mathematics. There's often no right or wrong, no black and white. We geologists know how to deal with uncertainty. We're allowed to think the unthinkable. A good knowledge of the regional geological story is the basis from which we operate. But at the end of the day, our creativity is judged by only one thing: the drill bit.